I think. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the fourth webinar in the series Beyond Plant Blindness, Understanding and Protecting Native Biodiversity, which is organised by the EXPBIO-Project. My name is Helen Ekvall. I work at Gothenburg Botanical Garden in Sweden and am a PhD student at the University of Gothenburg. Also with me is Gunilla, who is the project leader for EXPBIO and today my technical support. The EXPBIO project is funded by the EU Interreg North Sea programme. We are 8 partners from Sweden, Denmark, Germany, the Netherlands and Belgium. We are municipalities, universities, botanical gardens, public research institutes and governmental agencies. Our aim is to increase plant biodiversity in the North Sea region whilst also raising awareness about it. We are all concerned about the decline of flower and insect diversity and are trying to find ways to increase this. I'm delighted to see you here today, that you're interested in exploring practical and scientific approaches to raise plant awareness and increase engagement in the natural world. When we don't understand ecosystems and the roles that plants play in them, we may overlook the life forms we depend on. We cannot protect what we don't know, recognise or value. Last spring, we held a series of webinars on seed mixes and seed cultivation, followed by a second webinar series last autumn focusing on grassland restoration. This third and last series will focus on speakers who share their latest insights on how we can engage people in plant diversity, increase plant awareness, and also show how plants and wildlife can relieve stress. Last week, we listened to Jannik Verstraete from the regional landscape Houtland and Polders from Belgium, who talked about the importance of native plants in gardens when restoring insect populations. Today, I'm very pleased that Lars Pettersson is here to talk about the Swedish Butterfly Monitoring Scheme and how it's developed since it was founded 16 years ago. I'm sure we'll learn a lot from his experience. Lars Pettersson is an associate professor at Lund University, Sweden, and coordinator of the Swedish Butterfly Monitoring Scheme. Lars works with ecological and evolutionary aspects of conservation biology with a particular focus on butterflies and moths. This webinar will last about 1 hour, 30 to 40 minutes for the presentation, and the rest of the time for discussions. Some technical issues. Please mute your microphone and please write your questions in the chat for the discussions after the talk. With that, I hand over to you, Lars.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here and hope you will enjoy what I have to tell you about. So let's start here. Let's see here. And then I'll just move some parts here on my screen. Like that. Right. So, and everyone can see this, I suppose. Yep. Brilliant. So, thank you very much for being here. And my name is Lars Pettersson, as you heard, and I coordinate the Swedish Butterfly Monitoring Scheme since it started in 2010. And you might think of butterfly habitat to look like something like this, which is actually just outside Lund here in Sweden. But to cover what the butterfly fauna is in a country like Sweden, you also need something that will cover size like this, which is halfway, a little bit more than halfway through Sweden, is like along the Silver Road from Sweden across to Norway. This is place called Bärno, which is quite far north, but it could also be a place like this because butterflies live in forests as well. So we need a method to know where the butterflies are and to count them in a consistent way that is comparable between sites, but also over time. And the Swedish Butterfly Monitoring Scheme is a part of the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency, Naturvårdsverket's monitoring program. And we have sites from Beddingestrand in the south to Riksåvarazat up in the north. And it's volunteer-based, so people do this for the fun of it. But we do use standardized methods. So irrespective of whether someone is counting butterflies in the far south of Sweden or the northern tip of it, people use the same methods, which makes it comparable. People can select their sites themselves, but we help them and guide them to monitor the different habitats and to help selecting routes that will be meaningful for both them and for the butterflies that they want to cover. And last year we were nearly 400 volunteers and we covered nearly 700 sites. And if you want to follow us on Instagram, you can do that at Dagfjärdar. You can also look at our homepage, which is dagfjärdar.lu.se. And if anyone in this session is interested in joining, you can just email me afterwards or let me know in the chat, and we can send you some information. So we count butterflies, but we also count burnet moth. And those two are the main species groups that are active from the Lepidopterans or butterflies and moths that are active during the day. When you look at a butterfly, it's characteristic that they all have club-shaped antennas, and all butterflies are closely related to each other, and all have this feature. The burnet moths, on the other hand, they are moths, so a group of moths that are active during the day. They are more or less metallic in the coloration, and most species are black and red. The ecology is pretty much like a butterfly, so they are found in beautiful sunny meadows all across Sweden, and they are also quite easy to monitor. So if you're walking across one of those fields, they just mainly sit still and you can easily count them. And all of them are red listed except the mountain species. So we used to call them honorary butterflies because they behave like butterflies and they tell us quite a lot about the habitat. So why do we work with butterflies then? Well, butterflies and moths as well, they have many very good monitoring features. So if we start to the left here, you can find them in different environments. So you can be in a forest like the upper left image here, which is from Monk's Wood in Cambridgeshire. Or you could also count butterflies like in the lower left, which is up in the mountains in Arjeplog in Sweden. And you want to have something that is consistent in the way you actually count the species. So you find them in all habitats, and they are fairly common in most habitats. There are also ectotherms, meaning that their body temperature follows the environment, so they respond a lot to warm days and also to cold days, and that influences the way they respond to a changing climate as well. And one thing, the middle part here with the butterfly and the nettle or the stinging nettle, is that it's easy to think of butterflies as the adult butterflies or imagos that feed on nectar on plants. But if you really want to help butterflies, you need to think of the full life circle, where the butterflies, they lay eggs, and those eggs develop into caterpillars, and they need a host plant that they feed on. And they are fairly picky about what they eat. So if you don't have stinging nettles, then you won't have any peacocks, or you won't have any breeding in peacocks, because they really need to have stinging nettles to feed upon. So you have this life circle which goes from the adult and the needs of the adult, which is mainly floral resources where they can find nectar, and to the caterpillars that actually need a very specific host plant. So butterflies can tell us quite a bit about the vegetation where they are found as well. And another feature is that most of them are easy to recognize, and that has become even easier now that you can both document them with mobile phones, which you can take photos with digital cameras, and there are plenty of sites where you can either discuss with other people or you can upload images and have them classified with image analysis. So that has developed a lot, and it means that you can cover a lot of species without too much work. And also, more or less everyone loves butterflies, so that's also good. Finally, butterflies can have a lot of offspring, so if you do things right for them, they can increase from low numbers and become really numerous. So the burnet moths on the picture here, they're from a site in the southern part of Sweden where the Conservation Society found a farmer who happened to have quite a lot of pupae of burnet moths in the hay. So they asked him if he could please delay the harvest a little bit so that they would be able to pupate. And in collaboration with the municipality, they were able to help him so he could harvest and get some hay from other meadows and delay the harvest in this particular site. And the burnet moth population went from 50 individuals in 2013 to 14,000 in 3 years' time. So they can really increase in numbers. So how do you count butterflies then? This man who's walking here was the one who invented the modern way of counting butterflies. It's Ernie Pollard, and he wanted to have consistent ways of counting butterflies so that they would be comparable between sites, but also over time. And he wouldn't only want to have trends in distribution, meaning that you know where a particular species is found one year, and if it disappears or it appears in other site. If you just look at distribution, you don't really need to standardize for how much people look for different species. But if you want to standardize numbers or abundance, then you really need to know that people are counting in the same way, because someone could just be interested in the rare species and just report those, whereas someone else could report everything. So you need to have a way that is consistent and that people can follow a sort of standardized scheme. And it started here in Monk's Wood in Cambridge. And this is what the first transect looked like. It is just ordinary walk where Ernie decided that you count the butterflies next to you. So 2.5 meters to the right, 2.5 meters to the left, 5 meters above you, and 5 meters in front of you, which means that it is a fairly small volume that you count, but it's consistent. And you do this over regular visits when the butterfly is actually flying, so from April to September, and it should be sunny, warm, and not too windy. So if the weather is good enough, then you can count your butterflies. This is what transect could look like in Sweden. They're usually from a few hundred meters up to a few kilometers, and you try to put them in areas where you cover different habitats. When you do cover different habitats, we usually split them up into what we call segments. And you walk very slowly so that you don't miss things. And and you note the species and the numbers of each species for each segment. So you get a measure of what is within this sort of cube where you count the butterflies. We also have a different method in Sweden, which you call point sites, which is a specified area where you count for 15 minutes. A typical site would be 25-meter radius around the defined midpoint. It could be all sorts of habitats, but the point is that you go to the same area and you visit the same area for a specified time. So it's not that you walk into the forest one day and stay in next to the farm another one, but you count the same area every time. And the quite particular thing about butterflies is that they have different flight times. So if you count birds, you can more or less see every bird species in an area if you go out around midsummer. But that wouldn't work for butterflies because some species, they fly early, like the orange tip here, Aurora fjäril. That species, of which you see a male here, and you also see the map with the records that we have of it. That species flies in spring, so we see them from April until early July. But you wouldn't ever see that one in August because then it has bred and the orange tips, they are there, but they are eggs and the caterpillars, so you wouldn't see any adults flying around. So this particular one flies in spring, whereas if you look at the brown hairstreak, that is a species that overwinters as an egg. So it will have to develop from egg to caterpillar and pupate and then hatch. And you wouldn't ever see that one in spring. So it needs to be late summer and early autumn before you see that species. So to cover the different species, you need to have several visits during the season. So we usually recommend that people visit their sites every second week or so, but we can use data even a little bit sparser than that as well. And the method is used widely now. So in principle, all the countries in the European Union have a butterfly monitoring scheme now, and also some other countries like the UK and Norway and Switzerland. The first sites were monitored in the UK, up here in Scandinavia. Finland were out first, and in the south, Catalonia were also quite early. But the method has spread, so it is quite well, there are many sites that are being monitored now, and the point is that people use the same methodology, so it's really comparable across the entire continent. So why would you do this? This is Torbjörnvik, and he has a transect, or used to have a transect in southern Sweden, in Halland, where he walked and counted all the butterflies that he could see, just like everyone is doing along the transects. And his data on both rare and common species can be combined into something like this. And the point here is that the brimstone butterfly is the citronfjäril here. If you start with the first year that we had, 2010, and say that that is the reference, so that is 100% or 1, then you relate everything that you see to what we used to see in that year. So you can see that the trend went down and then gradually went a little bit up. And in this case, the trend is colored in the yellow color, which means that we see an increase over these 16 years. So that's one of the things that we can do. And then we can put out transects in areas like this. Nice place on the border between the county of Medelpad and Jämtland in central Sweden, where they have quite rare bird and moth. and they didn't really know what to do with this particular one. So they have a transect here, and they cut the grass in some areas and leave it for longer in others. And by having a transect here, they can see what management regimes that are actually benefiting this species. But we also have another goal of what we do, and that is to try to encourage people to explore local nature. And it was something that the Swedish EPA encouraged us to work for when we started, because there is a sort of tendency that everything is more exclusive nowadays. So people go abroad instead of watching things at home, or you watch nice things on the TV or something. And there's actually quite a lot of things around still, if you look for them. So this particular example is from the southern part of Sweden in Ystad, where the local conservation society found a former military training ground. So the cavalry used to be practicing in this area here, which is called the Nybro field. And it was due for development, so they wanted to have a parking lot for camper vans here. But the Conservation Society, they really wanted to look into this area. They knew that there was a lot of nice flora here, but they didn't know anything about the butterflies. So they started looking first at bees and then at butterflies. And what they found was that this particular species here, the large blue, had one of the strongest populations in the south of Sweden, and this is a really quite rare species that we believed we had a good picture of where they should be found, but no one had ever been to this site. And this species to the left here, the Niobe butterfly or fritillary, that one is really quite rare. And my own site outside Lund here, where I usually count butterflies, is one of the best in Sweden. And on a good day on that site, we see maybe 7 or 8 of this species. And I went to an excursion here with the Conservation Society, and when we had walked the transect, we had counted 83 of them, and that number hadn't been seen in Sweden for 50 years. So, and the place is just outside a densely populated area. So there are really things to be discovered if you start looking for them. And this is what the scheme looks like today. We are mostly covering Sweden in the south, but we increase the coverage over time. So this is a little bit of a picture of where people live in Sweden. We've seen a little bit more than 1 million of butterflies, covered 1,800 sites, and 119 species of the maybe 110 to 115 resident butterfly species, and the 7 burnet moths. So a fair share of the total number of butterflies. And we can do regional comparisons by covering different areas. So we don't have a habitat-specific scheme, because that would involve lots of people walking in the forest and maybe not seeing so much. So we increase the number of sites instead, and powered with that as the strength of the scheme, we're able to make local comparisons as well. So when we do that, we can see things like here, where the green-veined white, which we have here, rapsfjäril, can be increasing in central Sweden, be stable in the west, and be decreasing in other areas. So the country is a really big one and covering a lot of latitudes, so there can be several trends at the same time. So just having a common trend for everyone would sort of hide the regional dynamics that we really see here. And to give you another picture of this, we can zoom in on one part of Sweden here, Västergötland, which is in western Sweden, and look at what happens to the actual butterflies here. And all of this is based on volunteer data. So the brimstone butterfly, citronfjäril, that species is increasing in Western Sweden. So the overall trend is positive. So it's doing well, and it's the third most common species in this part of Sweden. If we compare the regional trend, which is seen in green here, it's quite similar to the national trend, which is the dashed line here. So overall in Sweden, this species is also increasing. So what it's doing in Västergötland is the same as what it is doing in Sweden as a whole. If we go to the most common Swedish species, the ringlet, that one is stable, which is shown as a magenta color here. It varies quite a bit, and you can see that the confidence is less strong here. So the real trend is somewhere between these dashed lines. So this is where we are 95% that the real value is, but over time it's stable. So it is doing okay in the west of Sweden. But if we look at Sweden as a whole, there was a crash in the population here when we had a major drought in 2018. So it went down a lot, and it hasn't recovered since then. It is slowly recovering, but it is not up to where it used to be before. So the overall trend for this one is going down in Sweden. And finally, when we come to the green-veined white, which is the most common species in Västergötland, this one is stable, and you can see here that it is stable, meaning that the final year here isn't very different from what it started with, but it can be going down and up across years, but overall it's where it used to be. So it's stable in the west of Sweden, whereas if you look at the trend for Sweden as a whole, it's actually going down. We hope that it will come back, but not yet. And this particular species is actually the species that is most widespread in Sweden. So if you go out anywhere in Sweden and spot a butterfly, it is quite likely that it could be this one. It's not the most numerous one, but it is the most widespread one. And then we can also look at those species trends together. And these 12 species here are all species that live in grasslands. And you can average the trends for those species and use them as an assessment of what butterflies are doing in this habitat. So you have a lot of individual trends for this. We actually have trends for 11 of those 12 species in Sweden. And those are incidentally the same species that you find in the European indicator for grassland species. So this is an indicator of how well butterflies are doing in the grassland habitat. And those are the 12 out of a total of 17 species that we found in Sweden. And this is actually the very newest version of how the butterflies in grasslands are doing. So this was published last week. And the quite depressing fact here is that if we start with 1990, which is the first year when we had several butterfly monitoring schemes running, and set that to 100%, you can see that we are down to between 50 and 60%. In this case, it's the European Union species. In this case, we also bring in Norway, the UK, and Switzerland. So bringing more countries in shows that we are a little bit more confident about the trends, but both are going down quite a bit. And when we look at the reasons for this, it is mainly because of intensification, so that habitats are used in more intense ways. in Western Europe, it's often that there's a lot of nitrogen deposition, which means that plants that are nitrogen favored outcompete traditional meadow plants. But you also have abandonment, which is a problem in the southeast and the south of Europe, but also a problem here up in Scandinavia, where species-rich habitats are abandoned. But you can run this analysis on a national level as well, and keep in mind that all this data comes from a lot of volunteers that have contributed, counting every butterfly that they see in a standardized way. And these are the indicators that we provide to the Swedish EPA, Naturvårdsverket. And what we see for across Sweden is that the 20 most common butterflies, they are decreasing over this period, whereas the grassland butterflies, the ones that you just saw for Europe, they are actually stable now. They have been going down for several years, but last year was a really good year for those species. So it has gone from being on the decline for quite some time and has been rescued by last year. So now this trend is actually stable, which is a big improvement from what it used to be. You can see the jump here from the trend. And we also have indicators for farmland butterflies. They are unfortunately also going down for Sweden as a whole. And we have it for the forest butterflies, which is stable. But it becomes really interesting when you start looking at regions here, because you can split these trends into regions. So here we have for all 4 indicators, the 20 most common butterflies, they are decreasing here in the south, but they are stable in other parts of Sweden. So the big decrease here is pulling the effect a lot. So this is where we had the severe drought in 2018 and also another drought in 2023. So this is a really problematic area for the butterflies. And when we look at grassland butterflies, they are also having problems in the south. They are stable here in central Sweden, and there's a tendency that they decrease up north. For farmland butterflies, also decline here, decline in central Sweden, but actually positive here in the west. So this is also the most rainy part of Sweden. So the butterflies in the agricultural habitats are doing quite well in more rainy habitats. And then it's fairly stable into other regions. And finally, the forest butterflies, they are a little bit all over the place. They are stable in the west, and there are tendencies up and down here in other parts of Sweden, but they're also going down in the south. So we can have several trends at the same time, which is really important for a big country like Sweden, so that you don't just even everything out, but you look at the details. And this makes it more relevant for the volunteers as well, that you can see what is actually, if you live in Jämtland, which is here, what is actually the trend in Jämtland for these species? What is it relative to the rest of Sweden? So you can pinpoint the trends where people live, which makes it much more relevant for them. And finally here, this is a little bit depressing study that came about a year ago from America, where they had merged a lot of monitoring schemes and looked at trends for butterflies in the United States. And it's a little bit complicated, but I'll try to walk you through this. The dark red color here is still a definite decline, whereas the dark blue are definite increases. The light ones are tendencies up here and down here, and the green one are stable. And when you look at all the butterflies in the United States and the trends that they have over this period from 2000 until 2020, the sort of median or the average butterfly species is decreasing 40% over those 20 years. And we ran the same analysis for Sweden, and the median species in Sweden decreased 20%. So there are some species that increase, there are a lot of species that decrease, but the median species ended up here 20% down. But after this, we had this nice year for the butterflies last year. What happened is that things have actually improved. So the nice weather has come to the rescue. So the decrease is now just 5%. So a good year can increase things quite a bit here, and that comes back to the fact that butterflies they are ectotherms and they respond strongly to favorable situations and favorable conditions, and they can have a lot of offspring, so a good season can help them quite a bit. If it's a drought and they are sensitive to drought, then they can be quite hurt, those populations, but the nice years can also rescue them. And all of this is based on volunteers that count the butterflies just around the corner where they live. Yeah, I'd like to finish by saying a great thanks to these people who have supplied pictures, but most of all to all the volunteers that actually make all this possible. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Lars. That was really interesting, and both positive and negative things going on with the butterflies. There are I've got a couple of questions. If anyone has any questions, please write them in the chat. And I was wondering how the volunteers report in their results. Is that an app, or how is that?
There are apps. We haven't introduced them widely yet because I want them to be better than the alternatives. So it's not confusing for the volunteers that they have too many channels to report through. So some prefer to write their reports in print, and they are allowed to do that. So we can handle that. We started off with that, and there are some that like to keep doing that, and we can use those reports just as well as any other reports. Most people, I would say 80% or so, submit their reports over the website. The plan is to move towards an app, and there are quite good apps around. We want them to be even closer to show the map where they are walking and things like that. But it's in the works, so we have to hope to be piloting that for Sweden maybe this year. We'll see. But the apps are there, and you can report using them, but there are some tweaks that we need.
Thank you. Another question. There's a few questions here. I think you mentioned how the sites were chosen. Is it optional that people can choose? If, say, for example, I could choose my outside of my garden, or do you have sites that you decide this area needs focus? How does that work with volunteers?
We travel around and talk to people, and so we're invited to give talks like this, for instance, and then people ask, well, can I have a transect here or a point site somewhere? And we usually help them to where they could, how they should map it to the surroundings to cover habitats in the best way. Usually, I'd say that the transect is not only the oldest way of doing this, but it's also the best, because you cover different habitats and you cover more ground when you walk. and since you do that, you see more butterflies. But it's also that if you, for instance, if you have a point site in your garden, that's absolutely fine, and I have that myself. But it's a little bit more sensitive to the flower resources in the garden. So a transect covers flower resources in various parts along the transect in a better way often than what a point site does. But the point sites are invaluable as well. But yeah, we try to encourage them to find the spots that are meaningful for them and that cover different habitats, and to cover the Sweden as a whole. We travel around and give lectures in various parts. So we reach out to them through media, but also through direct visits.
Cool. There's a comment here that the butterfly count app that's used in Denmark is fantastic. Have you seen that?
Yeah, that is the one that we intend to tweak a little bit. We use it for moths, and there is a couple of options of how to report using that app. The thing is that it's absolutely best for what is called the 15-minute counts, which is sort of casual observations where you can, if you happen to be on holiday and you do butterfly count where you're just walking casually, it's super brilliant for that. Is a little bit less perfect for the transect as it is, but there are ways of upgrading that. So we hope to have that in place quite soon. So it's that particular app that we are working with.
Okay. Oh, great. Have you tried engaging schools in the monitoring? Is that something you've thought about with children, or engaging?
Yeah, we do that from time to time. The tricky part is that when you have most butterflies, they're going on holiday. So it's a little bit bit of a problem since they're not there. They're during June and July and part of August. But otherwise, it's super nice to engage them in this, and they really like it. And we've been out on excursions, and one excursion up in Luleå in the far north. The parents had bought them sort of mini nets this size from dollar store, and I told them that well, good luck, but you won't catch any butterflies with those nets because they are tiny. And they sent out the 5 to 7 year olds, and they came back with lots of butterflies. So ideally you should have everything is transit, or every transit walked by kids, because they are much better at catching everything.
That's great. Has any species gone extinct during this period from 1990 in Sweden?
Yeah, unfortunately, the drought made us lose 2 species. Maybe there is also another species up in the far north that has gone extinct. But before that, we hadn't lost a species for ages. There was one extinction in 1970, and that species has recolonized Sweden. But apart from that, we're proud to say that we didn't have any extinctions here. You can see that a lot of species were sort of pushed back to the core areas where the habitats were the best, but we didn't have any extinctions. But then during the drought, 2 of the species where people had, one was, everyone knew that particular one was having problems because the habitat had almost disappeared. But the other one was people were doing great things and helping the habitat and doing introductions and things. But nevertheless, it went extinct when everything was struck by that drought. So it is sensitive if you have small populations, and also if you forget to look at the landscape as a whole, because it's easy to think that you should just optimize the tiny place where you find the butterfly, but unless you think of the landscape as a whole, then you might find yourself in a situation where drought would push the butterflies into surrounding areas because they might be more shady or a little bit more moist habitats that they wouldn't use otherwise, but during climatic extremes they would use them. So we've seen that on the island of Gotland, where some of the species like the marsh fritillary, they were disappearing from the what was thought to be the best habitat into forest, where they are more or less never seen. But they were able to stay in there and breed because they had host plants in the forest as well. Not as many, but they did have them, and then they could come back into the habitat a few years later. So it's really important to look at the landscape as a whole and not just what we believe to be the optimal patches, because they are all over the place and they move through this habitat as well.
That's interesting, very interesting. Are there any new species of butterflies that you found during the same period as well?
Yeah, there are. There's this species that went extinct that has recolonized, and that has appeared on a few sites, and it's actually a funny blue butterfly called geranium bronze that has established. That is actually South African, but has established on the continent. You can find them in the south of France, but also up to Belgium and other places. But it lives on pelargoniums. But I think it was 7 or 8 years ago, there was a volunteer in Husqvarna in the south, and he told me that he had this funny-looking butterfly, which look with the underside that looks like doodles or something. And I asked him if it was maybe a moth, but it wasn't. And then, as it was, I had just been in the south of France and thought that, well, maybe it could be one of those, and asked him to send a picture. And then it was actually one of those pelargonium species that was sitting on. So it had been brought up there and hatched on his particular little site. But there are other species coming in. There are also species colonizing from Finland. There's one called what is it called? It's a relative of the purple emperor that has colonized and has spread from Stockholm and inland towards Uppsala and further on. So it has I think it's called lesser purple emperor. So that has also come over these years.
Do you think climate change, warming, do you see butterflies changing, that they're going more north as well, certain species?
Yeah, definitely, and both northwards and uphill as well. So you can see them going north, and you also see them going in towards the Swedish mountains. So it's definitely a move, and it's happening most for the species that good flyers, but also the ones that well, the caterpillars like nitrogen favored plants because they're quite abundant in the landscape. So but also those that like a warmer climate. So several species, both in terms of moths and butterflies, have been going north quite a bit. And that's also a funny part of being a volunteer, especially up north, that you can. I mean, there was a lady in north of Polar Circle, and she has a butterfly point site in her garden, and she sent me pictures of silver washed fritillary, which was quite common species further south. But when we looked at the maps where it has been found, it was the second northern spotting of that species in the world in her backyard. So it's it's one of those things that, especially if you live up north, you can see those changes for yourself, and thanks to the cameras, you can also document them.
Yeah, wow. Okay, we've got quite a few more questions here. There's some comment, it sounds like a cool project for old people's homes where you could have a butterfly garden, a lot of bored people with a lot of time finding butterflies and other insects. That sounds like a great idea. Yeah. And do you have statistics about how the number of volunteers have increased? Are there any hotspots where a lot of people are engaged?
Yeah, that comes and goes a little bit. Uh, we started on the island of Gotland, and they were sort of on the starting blocks of starting something with butterflies anyway. So the county administrative board of Gotland, they invited me in 2010, and everything was just set to start something. They bought cinnamon buns for 20 people, and they were 108 at that meeting. So it was just quite amazing. And
Wow.
for some time, they had more transects on Gotland than in all of Finland. So it was really quite amazing. So there are places like that, but you also realize over time that you have to have continuous recruitment, because people age and they move, and that happens. So often see areas where you recruited maybe 20 people at the stage, and they kept going for several years, but then they get older, they move, and unless you have this continuous contact with people and recruitment, then all of a sudden you can lose the coverage in such an area. So it is really important to reach out to all areas, but we do have we have hotspots, and they come and go because of the age structure.
I think that was actually one of the questions here, is how you recruit your volunteers. And also, are there any other monitoring schemes available for other species like bees and bumblebees that are similar, with the similar engagement or projects?
There is the bird monitoring scheme that works in the same way, and they started in 1975 in Sweden. But for insects, there is I think there are several sort of local projects where they make maps of distribution in a county, for example. There isn't, as far as I know, similar scheme in Sweden for other groups, but people report it more individual, or they more like casual observations, or that they make distribution and atlas work. But I think it's coming, and we hope to be launching moth monitoring as well. And the European Union, they plan for a pollinator monitoring scheme, but that is to be run by professionals. So that is a little bit of different thing. We have tested it with volunteers, and we actually tested that across the continent. So we had pilot projects that tested pollinator monitoring, but it's tricky because some of the species are quite difficult, and it involves quite a lot of hard work. And in the end, the European Union decided to go for professionals, but it might be a role for volunteers, for moths at least.
There's actually a question about moths here as well, if you can recommend any literature, any moth literature.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can also use the Butterfly Count app that was mentioned, because it's got a brilliant classifier. So it's a little bit annoying. I started with moths in the 1980s, so I spent a lot of time in the forest and the other places with a strong light bulb at night. And now you can have a classifier in your phone that is pretty much as good as I have ever been, which is a little bit annoying, but it's also very, very nice, because it means that lots of people can work with moths that couldn't do that before. So, but I can definitely provide a few references. If I hold a book here, it will disappear in the camera, but I can send you a few references.
Yeah, maybe you could write them in the chat at the end, Lars.
Yeah, I could do that.
Could you do that? Would that be fine? Yeah, we just got a couple more questions, and then we'll have to round up. Have you noticed if counting butterflies could be an effective way of raising interest among people that have not been so interested in the change in biodiversity and climate problems as butterflies are so beautiful?
Yeah, when we started, I'd say that many expected the volunteers to be sort of entomologists that would join because they are interested in insects. But it turns out that most of the people are more interested in sort of walking their dog or walking in the forest or haven't thought of it before. So it's like the person who is currently the one who knows pretty much most of the mountain butterflies in Sweden. He came to a meeting that we had more than 10 years ago now, and was planning to help them to make the coffee for that meeting. And it turned out that he became so interested, so he decided to start working with butterflies. So he is really good at it now, but he had no interest before at all. So it definitely happens.
Oh, cool. Should we take this as our last question and then we'll round off? And if people want to write any questions, we can maybe Lars can reply to those in the chat later. Last question here then. Do you collaborate with organizations counting butterflies in other countries?
Yeah, we are part of what is called Butterfly Conservation Europe, which is all the butterfly monitoring scheme across schemes across the continent. So we have that as a collaboration, and we also submit all the data from the individual schemes to a central database, which is used to make this indicator for the butterflies in grasslands across the continent. And together with the bird monitoring scheme, it's actually the only indicators of ecosystem health that you have that are connected to organisms. Otherwise, you have several measures, but they are usually sort of physical or spatial or something else. But these ones are actually the birds and butterflies. We know what they do, and when they go up or down in numbers, then we can work with that. So it's quite brilliant, and we do that closely in that collaboration.
Yeah, that's really brilliant. Thank you. Got a thank you there. Okay. I would like to say thank you very much to Lars today. It's been really interesting. There's probably more questions I haven't managed to answer, but we'll have a look at those. Next week, our final webinar reflects on our partners from Göring's health-focused perspective on biodiversity. And during this webinar, Maria Abrahamsson and Eva-Lena Larsson will share their experience and knowledge from working with nature-based interventions for people with stress-related exhaustion. If you would like to attend this webinar, please register. And remember that all the webinars are recorded. The first ones are already available on the Interreg webpage. After the whole webinar series is accomplished, you will receive an email with a questionnaire on reflections and learning, and we would greatly appreciate if you could please fill this in. You can still use the chat for another few minutes if you have any remaining thoughts to share, and we will check it afterwards and get back to you. And on behalf of the entire EXPBIO team, I would like to thank you for participating, and we hope to see you again next week. Bye.